Coffee has never handed you a single unit of energy. That jolt you feel comes from somewhere else, a chemical your own brain has been making since the moment you woke up. Cooks and coffee drinkers have trusted that first cup for generations, without ever knowing what it was really doing. Once you see what that chemical is and how your cup gets in its way, the whole ritual makes more sense than it ever has. Nothing about your morning needs to change, only what you understand about it. You've made that cup the same way for years, maybe decades, and there's nothing wrong with the habit itself. What's wrong is the story most people tell about why it works. Coffee got cast as the thing that hands you energy, like a battery you plug in before anything else happens in the morning. It's an easy story to believe, since the feeling shows up fast and nothing about it tells you where it actually came from. But energy doesn't work that way inside the body, and coffee was never built to create it. The real story starts somewhere else, with a chemical your own brain makes hour after hour, whether you drink coffee or not. And that chemical is the actual reason you feel tired to begin with. Coffee's whole job is to deal with that chemical, not to replace anything your body burns for fuel. There are two pieces to this: what actually makes you tired, and what your cup does about it once that tiredness starts to build. Once you know the first piece, the second one falls into place fast. Every time a brain cell fires, it burns a little fuel to do the job, the same way a muscle burns fuel to move. That fuel is a molecule called ATP, and burning it leaves behind a leftover called adenosine. Adenosine isn't released on a schedule the way certain hormones are. It shows up as a direct byproduct of the brain doing work. So the more the brain fires through the day, thinking, focusing, paying attention, the more adenosine piles up in the background. Picture it like a running tally your brain keeps of its own activity. A slow, easy day adds to that tally gradually. A long day full of hard thinking, problem solving, or stress adds to it fast, which is part of why some days leave you feeling wrecked by 4 p.m. while others barely touch you. You never get to check that tally the way you'd glance at a phone battery. You just feel the weight of it build without ever seeing the number underneath. Sleep scientists call this buildup sleep pressure, and it climbs in a fairly steady line the longer you stay awake. It doesn't drain away on its own during the day, no matter how you try to distract yourself from it. It only really comes down during deep sleep, especially in the first stretch of the night, when the brain clears out adenosine the fastest. A rough start to the night ends up costing you more the next day than losing that same amount of sleep later on. By the time you wake up, that tally has mostly reset. Then the moment your eyes open, the clock starts again, and the tally begins climbing from 0. That climbing tally, not some vague idea of energy, is what tiredness actually is. It's a real physical signal your brain sends to itself, built from the plain act of using your brain. That tally was never coffee's target. What it goes after instead is the signal itself. The moment the tally tries to tell your brain it's time to slow down. Caffeine is shaped a lot like adenosine at the molecular level, close enough that it fits into the same docking spots on brain cells. The receptors adenosine normally binds to when it sends its signal. Think of those receptors like reserved seats. Adenosine is the one who's supposed to sit down and do the job, calming certain circuits and easing the brain toward sleep. Caffeine gets to the seat first and settles into it, but it never does any of that work. It just occupies the spot, the way a coat thrown over a chair holds it without a person in it. So the real signal never gets through. That's the whole trick in one image. A seat held, not a seat filled. There are two kinds of these seats that matter here. One type, when adenosine reaches it, quiets the brain's alert circuits directly. The other helps trigger the actual switch into sleep once enough signal has built up. Caffeine blocks both kinds at once, which is why it doesn't just stop you from feeling sleepy. It also delays the moment your brain would otherwise start winding down. That same blocking effect reaches into the brain's reward and motivation circuits too, in a region tied closely to drive and follow through. Researchers studying mice found that when this specific area couldn't respond to caffeine at all, the usual jolt of wakefulness barely showed up. That's part of why coffee doesn't just make a task feel less exhausting. It makes the task feel worth doing at all. None of this adds anything. Caffeine doesn't create alertness out of nothing. It borrows a seat reserved for a different signal and sits there long enough that the signal can't get through. But the tally from a minute ago is still climbing the entire time this is happening, right underneath the blocked seats. Blocking the seats doesn't slow down how fast your brain makes adenosine, and that's where it gets interesting. Production keeps running at the same pace it always does, and if caffeine has you thinking faster or working harder than you would otherwise, it can even speed up. While caffeine sits in those receptors, the actual tally underneath keeps building, unbothered, stacking up a bigger backlog of adenosine with nowhere to go. One way people explain this is to picture a car's low fuel light with a piece of cardboard taped over it. The tape doesn't refill the tank. It just keeps the light from bothering you, and the fuel keeps draining exactly like it always would. Once that tape comes off, the light doesn't ease back on gently. It comes on all at once, because the tank has been running low the entire time. That's close to what happens once caffeine clears out of your system, usually a few hours after that cup. All the receptors that were being held shut open, back up together, and the adenosine that piled up while they were blocked rushes in to fill them. That's the afternoon slump a lot of people already know well. The one that can feel sudden and heavy instead of slow and gradual. Do this every morning for years and the brain adjusts to it, building a few extra seats to make up for the ones caffeine keeps taking, which is why the exact same cup can start to feel like it's doing less than it used to. None of that makes the coffee dishonest. It did exactly what it was built to do the entire time. It just did it by holding a door shut, not by adding anything behind it. Put those two pieces side by side, and the whole picture snaps into focus. Coffee was never generating anything. It was interrupting a message your own brain sends itself, one that kept getting louder underneath the whole time you were drinking it. Turns out, the ritual still works exactly the way it's always felt like it works. That alertness is real, the focus is real, and the lift in mood is real too. It's just not coming from fuel added to a tank. It's coming from a signal getting muted at the exact moment it would otherwise be getting through. This also explains a pattern you've probably noticed for years, without ever connecting it to a real mechanism. A short, rough night makes that same cup feel like it's doing more work the next morning, because the tally started higher before caffeine ever touched it. A long, easy night makes the same cup feel almost unnecessary, because there's less signal left to block. And it explains something else. Why this habit has held up for centuries among cooks and coffee drinkers who never had a name for any of it. Nobody needed to know about receptors or running tallies for the trick to work. The chemistry was doing its job long before anyone had the words to describe it. None of this means your morning needs to change. It just means you finally know what that first cup is doing in your hand. People have leaned on this trick for hundreds of years without ever naming a receptor, and it worked anyway. Chemistry holding its ground in the background of an ordinary morning. If you like knowing the why behind the how, subscribe, and the next one will find you.